Imagine a world where more women have the time to fully explore their genius. Welcome to She Rebel Radio, the UK's podcast for women leaders and founders ready to unlearn conventional rules and lead their businesses of significance. Hailed for counter-status quo ideas and a whole dose of feminine perspective, my name's Lulu Minns. I host retreats and create spaces for women leaders to explore their genius. And today, I'm going to create that same space right here for you on this podcast. Welcome to episode 122 of She Rebel Radio. Barbie, a feminist icon. This is a special episode. I couldn't possibly leave you this summer without talking about Barbie. She's taken over the world with Barbie Land and Barbenheimer. And Barbie goes a step further, asking us not to imagine a world where women simply had the time to develop their genius. She asks us to imagine a world where women were in charge and men were simply objectified. Has Barbie finally evolved from a problematic doll into a feminist icon? Or was she always that feminist icon in the first place? For some, she's perhaps created more problems. There has been a guy in particular burning Barbie dolls on YouTube. I'm very upset that the word patriarchy has been used in the film several times, and there's been some negative reviews. But let's face it, most of them have been positive ones. So for this episode, we're going to dive into the 5 reasons why Barbie is a feminist icon. We're certainly going to highlight some of the problems, and we're going to speak to Susan Bishop, who's a fashion historian, curator and lecturer. She has 45 years experience in fashion and curation. She's an accredited speaker and is going to share with us a little about the history of dolls and why Barbie plays such a significant part. Now, I'm sure I've mentioned before, my mum is a feminist. In fact, both my parents, my father is too, but I'm pretty sure that it was mum's decision to ban Barbie from the house. She was not allowed in our house due to her stereotypical image, an unattainable image for girls to keep up with. And that's something we're all well aware of. But before you feel sorry for me for not having Barbie in the house, or you decide that was a super smart decision by my mum, it didn't last very long. It was a nice idea until a family friend turned up. I think she was actually uninvited, but was trying to fit in with the other mums with a birthday cake in tow with those little sugar mice that you used to get in the 1980s, and a birthday present for my sister, which was, yes, you guessed it, a Barbie doll. So once Barbie had broken into the house, there was no going back. My sister had a Barbie, I wanted a Barbie, we then had several Barbies, so many that my mum said the other day she got so tired of finding their little shoes all around the house, hoovering them up, that she used to stick them on with glue. Now, I'm sure we were upset because a big part of Barbie is the outfit change, but was she so much more than that? I studied sociology at college, and my A-level coursework at the end of my sociology, I went on to do a sociology degree, is a big part of why I do what I do. That coursework was on girls and boys toys and the differences of those toys and the advertising, etc. And Barbie, I have got no doubt, played a big part in that. And also I was doing photography at the time and did a lot of fashion photography, studying Bieber in the 1960s, which was creating a very different narrative for women and a different narrative in fashion. And Barbie was kind of running along this in the background. And you may remember a couple of episodes back in episode 120 where we were talking about where is your genius loci. And this is how the little threads of things that you are meant to do in the world start to pull together and really manifest themselves in our businesses of significance, in what it is that we're here to do. So this is, some of my threads, and I couldn't leave the summer without talking to you about this. And as I said, it's been quite a triggering thought for some men to just imagine this flipped world where women were in charge and men were simply objectified. And I find it really interesting that Barbie came out on the weekend of Barbenheimer. There's been an exceptional marketing, which we're not going to dive into the marketing today, but marketing campaign, and using Barbenheimer to kind of maneuver the film to top of the box office. And what we have is quite extreme masculine energy. Oppenheimer, the film, is about the guy who invented the atomic bomb. On the flip side, we've got the real feminine energy, the Land of Pink, and Ruth Handler, who created Barbie, a toy for girls. So we've got extreme feminine energy, extreme masculine energy. And, you know, one of my values behind this podcast, and also the work that I do with women leaders, and I teach lots of feminine-based principles, is integrity and wholeness. So we're kind of seeing a war at the box office. Many people are going to see both. We're seeing men massively triggered by this world of imagining a world where women were in charge and men were simply objectified. But we need both masculine and feminine energy, those opposite forces. There's a polarity that they totally pull away from each other. But what you get in the middle is balance and harmony. So I just wanted to kind of open on that. Because it's incredibly important, and it's an important value and principle behind everything that I do and everything that I teach. But on that note, on that foundation, let's dive into, and I think it's extremely interesting what's going on in the collective, but let's dive into the 5 reasons why Barbie is a feminist icon. Number 1, she was made by women for women. And you might think, well, it's a toy made for girls. But the idea is that a little girl could be whoever she wanted to be through that doll. Barbie had the ability to work and be who she wanted to be. And through playing with the doll as a little girl, the woman version of that girl could be whoever she wanted to be. Now, prior to this, and I think the film really shows this very well, little girls had baby dolls to play with. We could play mum and look after our baby dolls. We didn't have many things to play with that really created for us an imaginary world of who it is that we could become, which I think is incredibly significant. We could play mum, we couldn't play ourselves. Now, Ruth Handler created Barbie, who was first launched in 1959, but Mattel as a company was put together in 1945, and she was inspired by her daughter, who was playing with paper dolls. I used to love the paper dolls as well, and the little fold-on clothes that you would get. And she wanted to make a 3D version, and she used a German doll as inspiration. I think there might have been a legal case about that. And obviously Barbie was criticised for being highly sexualised. She had boobs, you know, this unattainable figure. She wasn't diverse. She was blonde, white-skinned, very long legs. Her boobs, were too big that she'd probably fall over, these tiny feet. And, the film has a lot of play on that. But Ruth Handler, as the creator and the president of Mattel for 30 years, but that didn't start till 1967, I think, had a vision that Barbie had an ability to work and be who she wanted to be. And those little girls could do that through the doll. She took massive risks. She was a huge visionary, and she was the first to advertise also on the Mickey Mouse Club. So instead of advertising to parents, you're actually advertising to the children as well. The children are getting to decide the toys and things that they want to play with. You could say that's extremely problematic, but we've got to kind of respect the vision and the risks that Ruth Handler took as a female founder and as a CEO. So, and alongside that, the vision that she had for little girls being who they wanted to be and not just playing mum. Is absolutely huge. Number 2 is Barbie is not defined by her relationship with Ken, or, as we've heard, her relationship to other by being a mum. And what's interesting is Ken was made for her a couple of years later as her sidekick. She wasn't the sidekick to Ken, he was the sidekick to her. And again, this is at a time where women were always the sidekicks and the secondary to the powerful men who were in charge. So Barbie defined herself. She was not defined by her partnership or being a mum or her relationship to anybody else, which is groundbreaking because women are still conditioned that our value comes out of who we're in relationship with and who we are caring for, and that we should put that person's needs before our own. So absolutely massive. And I love the fact that her and Ken have had an on-off relationship. They've been, modern living neighbours, and then lovers, and then not lovers. And, Barbie is a woman in her own right. And number 3 is she had her own property. Barbie's dream house is her dream house, and the pink convertible is her car. Again, absolutely groundbreaking for a woman to have her own property, in the late 50s, in the 60s, that the car and the house was hers. It wasn't Ken. Ken wasn't going to work and buying it. She was getting this stuff for herself. Now, we didn't have the Barbie dream house, and we didn't have the Barbie car either. We had a few hand-me-down Barbies, I think, over the years. But what my sister and I did have is a Care Bear car. And it was like a little cloud. And obviously Care Bears are a lot smaller than Barbie dolls. And we used to stick Barbie in the driving seat of the Care Bear car. So she did have her own car. It just wasn't the pink convertible. But she'd have her legs like a Kimbo over the steering wheel because she didn't fit her long legs into the car. So that's always a really strong memory that I have that me and my sister used to play with. So, it didn't have to be the convertible. We got the message that Barbie had her own car. The irony's not lost on me. I have a convertible, but it is a blue one. It's not a pink one. And number 3, really, really powerful, important for this message for girls that they can be who they want to be. They're not defined by their relationship, and they can have their own property, their own car. They don't need to rely on some guy to get that stuff for them. Number 4 is she reinvented herself time and time again. I often say that reinvention is a feminine principle. We see women do it at really significant stages of their lives. Madonna is an absolute mistress at this stuff. She's the queen of reinvention. And Barbie was no different. She, even in the 1960s, had career girl Barbie. We had astronaut Barbie after Neil Armstrong went to the moon. And also surgeon Barbie was created in 1973, I believe. And, surgeons in the medical profession is still massively male dominated. I was talking to a young female trainee doctor about this the other day, that surgery, who's doing a placement in surgery, is still massively male dominated. There are still inappropriate questions asked to women who want to do surgery, about marriage, about children, whether they're going to be doing those things as well. So, Barbie was doing this 50 years ago, which was really groundbreaking, putting Barbie in a surgeon's uniform and showing girls that they can do it too. Number 5 is the director, Greta Gerwig, of the Barbie film, who is also an actress as well, has broken the box office records in the opening weekend of a film that has been directed by a woman. So another huge first, that she has broken the box office with the record of people that have gone to see that film, which is an incredible breakthrough for us all as women, of being a director and not an actress, which is fine being an actress, but also, Reese Witherspoon talks about this, of being an actress and, being the supporting role with the male being the lead and asking the guys, what do we do now? That's why Reese Witherspoon created her production company, because she was so tired of not having the leading roles in films and has been involved in production as well. And, only 2% of the music industry is produced by women. I'm not sure on the stats on the film industry, but a massive, massive breakthrough. So there are 5 reasons why Barbie is a feminist icon, made by women for women, not defined by her relationship to other. She has her own property. She can reinvent herself and be who she wants to be. And the CEO of the film, or the director, of the film, has broken box office records as a female director. So, Barbie, if she hasn't been, has definitely become a feminist icon. But some reflection from me on this is she was started by a woman for women, or for girls. And we where we are in this present moment is breaking the box office records for a female director. So whilst Barbie may have got lost in the middle and made a load of faux pas, including with diversity in particular and that stereotypical body image, which has been really problematic for girls, I feel like she's come back round 360. She has started off with good intentions. She got lost in the middle and she's come back. She's come up good and smelling of roses. And the film's really about that self-development journey, that self-discovery journey that us women leaders know that we need to go on. We need to work on ourselves. And really encouraging within the film as well is that the guys need to do that too. We can't define ourselves by each other. We can't even define ourselves about what it is that we are, our job role, but we can define ourselves by who it is that we are. And I love that message in the film and our values and how it is that we support and share with other people. But what I love is preparing this episode for you and really seeing that Barbie started off with the right intention. She got a whole lot lost in the middle. We've all been there and found herself again, leading from a place of where she wanted to lead from. I feel like that was a really strong message. Now, let's dive into some more about Barbie and hear from Sue Bishop. I'd love to hear more about how does Barbie feature in the history of dolls? What's been her significance?
Well, can I just kind of go backwards a little bit and explain that the research that I'm currently doing for my talks kind of looks at fashion dolls, but it starts a bit earlier than Barbie. And I think what's interesting about the Barbie movie, it starts with this scene. I don't want to give anything away to people that haven't seen it, but it starts with this scene about girls playing with baby dolls, which they kind of chuck away because Barbie has arrived on the scene. And to go back a bit further, of course, dolls were not children's playthings. They were too expensive for that. They're like couture clothes. They were originally made for adults. Boudoir dolls, were sitting basically on ladies, furniture in their bedroom, and they were used to promote Paris couture. That's before we had the media that we had today. Dolls were sent all over the world to show what the new fashions were. So in that context, what we had dolls with baby faces that were dressed up in adults' clothes before we had Barbie. So yeah. Barbie was really the first teenage doll that had a wardrobe of up-to-date fashions. And those boxes that they talk about Barbie arriving in had a change of clothes. They had these little magazines in them that told, kids all about the trends. So it was a really big departure from what had happened before in terms of girls' dolls. And what the girls were being encouraged to do was to play and dress up these dolls in different outfits. And so every season, like, fashions, Barbie's clothes were launched as a separate product that parents could buy and give the children to dress their dolls. And of course, as well as that, there was still the culture in 1959, which is when Barbie was launched, of people making clothes for the dolls, because they were still making clothes for themselves and making clothes for their kids.
Yeah, so interesting. And when was the shift in terms of the history of dolls? And I hadn't thought of that before, with dolls advertising fashion, as it were, and not being playthings. When was the shift for little girls playing with baby dolls and playing mum, as it were, as the film kind of shows us?
Well, it was a bit earlier than Barbie. I mean, I haven't completely finished my research, but 1930s, 1940s, we started to get, most dolls were designed in France or Germany, and the major mass manufacturing was happening in Germany. So up until that point, we were importing dolls. I mean, of course, dolls go back centuries, but the idea of playing with babies, was something that happened probably in the kind of early 1900s or kind of 1920s, 1930s, I would say. So Barbie came along you realize in 1959 is the cusp of the 1960s when we got the high street fashions. So Barbie wasn't a couture doll, even though what we talk about is the fact that, you know, Armani designed dresses for her and Ralph Lauren designed dresses for her. I've got an Oleg Cassini skirt on one of my Barbies. But the point is, that wasn't her original kind of incarnation. She was a doll for everybody. And as, you know, the film rightly says, is that Ruth Handler, you know, her vision, because Barbie was named after her daughter, Barbara, of course, Ken after her boy son. You know, her vision was that she would promote this idea that girls could do everything. You know, she was part of the American dream. The whole career Barbie came along a bit later because, of course, the original Barbie looked very different. She was basically designed on a German doll called Bild Lilly, who was a character in a newspaper, but she was a doll for boys or men. She hung from the mirror in their car. She was given to girls from the boys. She was a sexy doll. And so that original, you know, discussion about her shape has come from that German doll originally. And also another reason for that shape is that if you didn't have a really small waist, you wouldn't actually be able to close the clothes and still have her in proportion. So there are other reasons for her shape than just the fact that she's a sexy doll.
Yeah, I think I read something about when they made a bigger Barbie, they, you know, couldn't get the skirt over her bum or something like that, of kind of the changeability of clothes and things like that. So, you know, as women, we've all been there. So how has Barbie's fashion and career moves kind of intertwined? You mentioned kind of career Barbie, and what has that meant for us as women, as you said about Ruth Handler's vision of us women being able to do anything? How have those kind of two things intertwined?
Well, 1959 was just after the Second World War, and obviously, you know, as a result of the war, women went out to work. Obviously, there were a lot of men killed during the war, and there were more jobs open to women. Historically, women were either sales girls or they were office clerks. But after 1959, you know, the world opened up, and we can see what has changed in society since then in terms of women taking on jobs that were historically men, you know, women being promoted into high you know, seniority within all of the different sectors. But that wasn't the case in 1959. So what Ruth Handler was encouraging women to do, go out there, get on with it, you know, be empowered. You can do whatever you like. You can be an astronaut, you can be a president, you can be anything that you want to be. And so it seems to me, looking back, is that every decade Ruth Handler had a different kind of idea about how she could empower women. I think that, you know, in terms of, I think we mentioned the film. Shall we mention the film? Here and there. I mean, the aim of the film, as it seems to me, listening to the interviews, is to kind of reinforce the feminist nature of Barbie, but she doesn't tackle all of the issues to do with feminism. She tackles the issues to do with identity, to do with confidence, to do with empowerment. And, you know, in a way, this film is very funny in terms of being a comedy where she's tackling the gender issue to do with the male-female relationships. And, you know, historically, the fact that Ken was quite a pathetic character and didn't really do very much. So it's just interesting, you know, that there was a real philosophy behind Barbie. She wasn't just a doll.
I agree. And I think as importantly as you said, you know, every decade Ruth Handler had a different idea, and I feel like the film brings that together, that kind of Barbie has evolved through the time. So we can be critical of, you know, her body image and where she's come from, but actually we need to recognize the time that she was created in.
Absolutely. And of course, she's changed dramatically. I mean, I had to buy this doll very recently because this is a doll with the big hips. And, it's just fascinating if you look at the decades of the body shape, and not just the body shape, but the makeup and the face and the shape of the nose and the shape of the mouth and the type of hair. I mean, Mattel really have done a good job in trying to go with the times and to show how society has changed and what is current in terms of women's fashions and what women look like. But
Yeah,
that
100%.
does also beg the question, because we know that social media and any type of imagery is going to influence young people. And I've read quite a lot of research in terms of, how young people get affected in terms of their body image. But you can't just put it on Barbie. You can't put that responsibility on her. She's a doll. She's
Yeah,
a character. She's not there to influence you. Although early on there was a little magazine that was given away as part of the box set that were ideas about how to slim down. So
yeah,
you could accuse Mattel at that point of being part of that picture. But I give talks on fashion shows, and it's no different. Fashion shows and models have had tiny waists and that kind of curvy figure, since the 1920s, when mannequins were first doing fashion shows in department stores. It's the same thing.
yeah. And I think what you brought out there is the significance of actually dolls originally were for fashion, not the other way around. So, Barbie has kind of followed that line, but become a doll for the everyday girl, for the ordinary person, and has had to evolve with that. What is the history of Black Barbie, and when did she first make her debut?
Well, the first black doll by Mattel came out in 1967, which is interesting because that was the period that Yves Saint Laurent and Paco Rabanne started to put black models onto the catwalk. She was named Francie, so she was Barbie's cousin, not actually Barbie. And then a year later, they launched the Christie doll, who was Barbie's friend, but she still wasn't Barbie. So actually, Black Barbie didn't come onto the market until 1980, by which time we had supermodels and we had Naomi Campbell. So we were mirroring what was going on in the marketplace. However, the Black and Hispanic dolls that came out in 1980 still look like Barbie in terms of their facial image and their body image. So they may have been black dolls, but they were not completely mirroring the kind of cultural black bodies. And that really didn't start to change until a lot later on, because the Dolls of the World were released in 1980 and they were developed to show global diversity. But it wasn't really until the early 2000s that they started to actually change the body shape to go along and the facial features to go along with the black cultures.
Amazing. So there's been a real evolution there.
Yeah. And it's very interesting that each decade has kind of created these new challenges. But I did notice on Mattel's website that, they really are a company that are trying to embrace that diversity and trying to mirror what's happening in society. So I think they are trying hard.
Yeah, I have heard that there is a film called Black Barbie coming out. I don't know if Mattel are involved in that. That's just something that I've heard, but we'll watch his space for that. So would you say Barbie is a feminist icon? And do you think she has always been one?
I find the word feminism quite difficult. And even when I watched the film, I had to say that there were lots of layers that for me didn't all kind of knit together, but I think they did a fantastic job. I mean, I think that what Barbie is meant to be an inspiration to young people and collectors. Of course, let's not forget that there's lots of adult collectors as well. And she's an inspiration about, and her dreamland and all of those accessories that you can buy in the shops are promoting a dream, a landscape of how Americans, because it is predominantly American, how Americans live, that kind of luxury lifestyle. And that's great. Not everybody can afford to live like that. And so in a way, it does set up a kind of difficult, conspicuous consumption, which at the moment in the economy that we're in is quite a difficult challenge for a lot of people. So whether I would call Barbie a feminist, I don't know. I would say that is harping back to this whole idea about you can be whatever you want to be. You can take on whatever career you want to take on. However, where Ken fits into this picture is still a bit of a mystery to me, because, in 1959, you still had to ask your husband's permission before you took out a credit agreement. He had to sign it.
Yeah.
We've moved a long way from that. But, women don't want to be at home. Women want to be out working, as well as having children, as well as doing the housework, and being Barbie perfect and very glamorous. It's quite a difficult challenge, and that still exists. So Barbie is still, she's still in the middle of all of that. I'm not quite sure where she's going to go from here, would be my question.
Yeah, there are no easy answers. I think one thing of significance, and I'm totally with you in terms of that American dream and what's attainable. But I think as you said, 1959, women had to ask for permission from husbands to have a credit agreement. That the fact, and I grew up with Barbies, that she could have her own car and her own house was something that, my parents, we didn't have a Barbie car, but I used to put her in a Care Bear car, which she was far too big for, and her legs used to go over the steering wheel. But the significance is not lost on me in terms of growing up and knowing that is something that I could do too. But I think there are still many big questions that remain for us as women, which Barbie signifies. So thank you for highlighting that. And you've become a collector of Barbie over the last few years. Why has that become significant for you?
Well, I think it all started when I was in Paris, actually, and I was outside a designer's window, and it wasn't a designer that you or I would know the name of. I mean, it was basically one of those kind of independent designer studios, and they had this whole window filled with Barbies, and in fact there is one in Brighton at the moment. And I just it kind of clicked with me that she was this icon. Historically, designers used dolls to try out their designs. I mean, she's a fantastic prop for all sorts of things. And at that time, I was teaching fashion marketing and business and retail merchandising to young 16, 17-year-olds. So it was great. I took all the Barbies in and we played around with it and we made dresses and all of those things. So that's how it started. Of course, my friend had made this wardrobe. Then, I got into buying vintage clothes for myself as well as my Barbies. So, more recently I have bought, vintage coats for my Barbies. So, I literally dress them up. So that's where I'm coming from. It's a whole big fashion game, to see whether I can find something really unique for my Barbies. I'm not really interested in designer clothes in the sense of designer names, but I'm not for myself either. They kind of imitate me in a way. That's the reality, is that they're I love dressing up and I love dressing them up. So it's a marriage made in heaven. And they're all so different from one another. Their faces, their makeup, their eyes, their hairdos, they do literally represent the multicultural picture that we have now of women in the UK.
So true to the film itself, I feel like we're having a number of endings of this Barbie episode. From me going to see the film on the Monday after it was released, making a decision in the foyer of the cinema that we needed a Barbie episode of She-Rebel. That was before I'd even seen the film, to concluding this on the Saturday before going live with you. It's safe to say I could have created a whole series on Barbie because of the rabbit holes and the warrens that we could have gone down. So I wanted to summarize a couple of things for you. And I feel like our conversation with Susan Bishop and the history of dolls really shows that Barbie mirrored the shifts and changes in the fashion world. She was kind of a microcosm of that world. And the fashion world is obviously mirroring the wider society. So the problems that have come up with Barbie, consumerism, the American dream, how that fits with the cost of living crisis, way back to pre-Barbie, dolls were not even something that families could afford. They were boutique items, to the issue of diversity, skin colour, facial features, body type, hair colour I'm going to throw in there. I remember getting super excited as a child for getting a Barbie with brown hair and a blue dress, and I have no idea why, because I'm a red-haired strawberry blonde. I don't think I've ever seen a Barbie with similar hair to me and freckles and all of that kind of stuff, to, you know, now Barbie embodying a lot more diversity, but then the pressure on us as women to be the women that has it all, and how attainable that is, if it's something that we even want, and this kind of image of perfection, which America Ferrera in the film does a big speech which got a round of applause about how impossible it is to be a woman in society and the problems that we face, that resonated with every single grown-up woman in that room. So, you know, Barbie's been really a microcosm of the bigger problems that we face. And the word I wanted to share with you before leaving this episode is ownership. Because when we own those problems as a society, as a collective, as individuals, that's when we can find solutions to them. But it's so important, as we've done in this episode and going back through the history of dolls with Susan, that we really recognise where these things come from. And I love in the film that Barbie really owned the problems that she created, so we can take that on an individual level. You know, the problems with Ken feeling really hopeless and worthless, and also the problems to other women and girls for the unattainable image and stereotype that she created. She had to own those problems and move through them. Also, we've seen Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, who I didn't realise actually co-produced the film, and actually was a huge catalyst to Barbie film, the film ever coming into play. They really created that vision and the story for Barbie themselves, bringing her out of a one-dimensional character into a multi-dimensional character. But what Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie have really owned here is their ambition to bring Barbie to life. And there's a fantastic interview with both of them prior to Barbie hitting the box office, where they're sharing really beautifully feminine-based principles of collaboration and also heart-based leadership. Because whilst they're saying that there is no way that they were going to create this film without the controversy, or embodying the controversy that Barbie has brought to us over the years, they wanted to have a great big heart behind the film, which I think really, really carries through, and they've owned their ambition to bringing Barbie to life. And then we've had Ruth Handler really owning, or taking back ownership of this German style, very westernized looking girl that was made to be sexy and to titillate men, made by men for men. And she took it back and she made Barbie, you know, into being owned by women, for women. And the film, and we know there's been problems with that over the years, but the premise is the same. She took ownership of something that had belonged to us, that didn't belong to us, that then came back to us, and actually used that as a model for women to, you know, pin their hopes and dreams upon. So The word here is ownership. So I want to leave you today with what is it that you can own more of today, and recognizing that we as women have a really complex relationship with ownership, because a big chunk of our history has been that we have been owned, and that we haven't been able to, as Susan said, have a credit agreement without the permission of our husbands, to have the dream of owning a car, a house, a career without it being relatable to who it was that we were married to, who we were in relationship with, and all of that kind of stuff. So we have to recognize that. I've worked with women and supported them with this stuff for over 8 years, and it comes up time and time again of this taking real ownership. And I'm going to ask you today, is it ownership of your ideas that you need? Is it ownership of a particular word that you want to embody? Is it you want to own your greater ambition and change that you want to make in the world? Is it that you need to own more of the obstacles that are getting in your way? That's what I wanted to leave you with this summer. It's been awesome to create the Barbie episode for you. I would always love your feedback online and otherwise. Share those Barbie memories with me, and share anything else that's come up for you as a thought, as a furthering of this conversation here on She Rebel Radio. Thank you for listening to She Rebel Radio. I've been Lulu Minns, and before you go, I'd love to invite you to join me online in September for 2 essential Women in Leadership trainings: the 3 Keys to Self-Actualization and the Feminine Leadership Principles. These 2 trainings will support you to unleash more of your genius into the world in only the way that you can. They are essentials for all women leaders and she rebels in today's world, and they will even deepen your perspective when tuning into this podcast. I'd love to see you there. Check out the show notes below.